Please note that it is an expert level certification, so please don't memorize and appear in the exam because you will have tough time passing this exam. If you missed question number 1 to 20, please check previous parcel series. So let's first look at option A. Option A says enable Microsoft Defender for Cosmos DB. Microsoft Defender for Cosmos DB cannot help to audit the users as required by the question here, therefore incorrect choice. We'll move to option B. Option B says send the Azure Active Directory sign-in logs to a log analytics workspace. Since by doing this will enable logging of all sign-in activities, including successful and failed attempts by all users accessing the Cosmos DB account. This will provide insight into who is accessing the data and when. This can be the potential answer. We'll keep this because the question is looking for two correct answers. Let's look at option C. C says send the Azure Cosmos DB logs to a log analytics workspace. This will enable logging of all activities within Cosmos DB account, including queries, modifications, and deletions. This will provide insight into what data is being accessed and how it is being used. We'll park this option aside as well. Let's look at option D. D says turn off local authentication for Azure Cosmos DB. Disabling local authentication is not a necessary step for auditing user access. Therefore, just a distractor. Will reject this. And if you look at the official documentation to verify the correctness of the answers, it says select control plane request for log type and select send to log analytics option. You can have read at this documentation, and the interest of time will lock option B and C as the correct answer. Alright, interesting question. Let's look at option A first. A says set the allow shared key access property to false. If any clients are currently accessing data in our storage account with shared key, then Microsoft recommends that we should migrate those clients to Azure AD before disallowing shared key access to the storage account. However, as per the scenario asked in the question, we cannot migrate to Azure AD due to the legacy applications. Hence, incorrect choice. Let's now move to option B. B says apply read-only logs on the storage account. This looks good as it will prevent the users from listing the keys. We'll keep this option aside. Let's look at option C. C says set the allow blob public access property to false. Disabling public access would not prevent new applications from obtaining the access keys. Therefore, incorrect choice. Let's look at option D now. D says use automated key rotation. Key rotation would improve security but cannot prevent applications from obtaining the access keys of the storage account as required here in the question. Therefore, incorrect choice. We'll look at the official documentation. It's written read only means authorized users can read a resource but they can't delete or update it. Applying this lock is similar to restricting all authorized users to the permissions that the reader rule provides. Hence, we'll lock option B, apply read-only locks on the storage accounts as the correct answer for this. Let's bring the heat to the snow. We'll look at option A and B together. Option A says Linux containers deployed to Azure Kubernetes service, and B says Windows container deployed to Azure Kubernetes service. Between option A and B, we got to choose one because both look almost same and both are related to Azure Kubernetes service. So Windows container, if you look, is not supported. We'll reject option B and keep option A for the timing. Let's now look at option D. D says Linux containers deployed to Azure Container Instances. Defender for containers only supports Azure Container Registry and doesn't support Azure Container Instances. Therefore, this looks incorrect. Let's look at the official documentation. It's written Defender for containers scans the container images in Azure Container Registry and Amazon AWS Elastic Container Registry, known as ECR, to provide agentless vulnerability assessments for your container images. I will lock option A and C as the correct answer. Okay, let's understand the question first. The question is about remote access to on-premise application through Azure AD application proxy. We'll look at now option A. A says Azure Virtual WAN is for end users and not for applications as required by the question. Also, it doesn't offer conditional access policies or conditional access because Azure AD is not being utilized. It's incorrect choice. Let's look at option C and D together. These looks interesting. C says computer vision, D says Azure functions. So computer vision is related to artificial intelligence, and Azure function we know is associated with serverless architecture. Both of these, if we look, are not required as per the question. Therefore, we can eliminate these two as well. We are left out with Azure AD application proxy, and it says in the official documentation that Microsoft Intra Application Proxy provides secure remote access to on-premises web application. After a single sign-on to Microsoft Intra ID, users can access both cloud and on-premises application through an external URL or an internal application portal. For example, application proxy can provide remote access and single sign-on to remote desktop, SharePoint, Teams, Tableau, Qlik, and line of business application. Here's a mention of on-premises application can use a conditional access. That's what is required by the question as well. So we'll lock option B as the correct answer. We are at question number 25 now. If you're finding these questions as tough, I recommend you to go through my AZ500 course videos or SC-200 course videos. Then please come back to this series because this is an expert level certification. And if your concepts you need to brush up, so I highly recommend you please go through those video series of mine. Let's look at option A. A says configure the advanced audit policy configuration settings for the domain containers. For correct events to be audited and included in Windows event log, the domain controllers require accurate advanced audit policy settings. This can be one of the potential answer. We'll park this. The question is looking for 2. Let's now look at option B. B says configure Windows event forwarding on the domain controllers. To enhance detection capabilities, Defender for Identity needs the Windows events listed in configure event connection. These can either be read automatically by the Defender for Identity sensor, or in case the Defender for Identity sensor is not deployed, it can be forwarded to the Defender for Identity standalone sensor in one of the 2 ways: by configuring the Defender for Identity standalone sensor to listen for CIM events, or by configuring Windows events forwarding. This can be another potential answer. We'll park this. Let's now look at option C. C says configure blob storage to forward the data from log analytics. There is no requirement of storage, so we don't need blob storage. Hence incorrect choice. Let's now move to option D. D says configure web application firewall to detect sensitive groups. So web application firewall can prevent malicious activities like cross-site scripting, SQL injection, etc., but cannot detect sensitive groups modified in Active Directory required by the question. So this option is a distractor. We'll reject this. In the official documentation, it's written for the correct events to be audited and included in the Windows event log, your domain controllers require specific Windows Server or advanced audit policy settings. Misconfigured advanced audit policy settings can cause gaps in the event log and incomplete Defender for Identity coverage. And in another documentation, it's written configure Windows event forwarding to your Microsoft Defender for Identity standalone sensor. Event forwarding is one method for enhancing your detection abilities with extra Windows events that aren't available from the domain controller network. That's what is required. We'll lock option A and B as the correct answer. This seems to be a brainstorming question this time. Let's look at option A. A says Azure Active Directory Domain Services, also known as Azure ADDS. Azure ADDS is a managed service which provides domain services such as domain join, group policy support, and LDAP and Kerberos based authentication for cloud-based application. It also allows us to use Azure AD Directory as managed domain without the need to set up, maintain, and secure an on-premises domain controller. This can help reduce the administrative effort required by the question to maintain the infrastructure and ensure that legacy applications continue to function as expected as required by the question. So this can be the potential answer. We'll park this. Let's move to option B and C. B says Azure Active Directory B2C. C says Azure Active Directory. So Azure Active Directory B2C and Azure AD do not provide support for legacy applications, which is what the question is looking for. That is, it relies on LDAP and Kerberos if we read the question carefully. Therefore, incorrect choice. We are left out with option D now. D says Active Directory Domain Service, also known as ADDS. Active Directory Domain Services instance would require maintaining additional infrastructure, which will require more administrative effort, which we definitely don't want as per the question, because the question is about reducing administrative effort. Also, if more admin effort is there, automatically it will be more cost intensive or efficient as a managed service like ADDS. So this is again out. We are left out with Azure ADDS. Let's look at the official documentation, what it has to say. It says a domain service managed domain lets you run legacy application in the cloud that can't use modern authentication methods, or where you don't want directory lookups to always go back to an on-premises ADDS environment. You can lift and shift those legacy applications from your on-premises environment into a managed domain without needing to manage the ADDS environment in the cloud. Looks good. We'll lock option A as the correct answer. Alright, we got a box type question. We'll focus on box 1. I marked the keyword for box 1. The statement says customer can use their Instagram credentials to authenticate to an Azure App Service website. So Instagram is just a reference. It's just meaning the social media can be like Facebook or can be like Gmail. So Instagram is just for reference. Just keep in mind. So in box 1, Azure AD B2C authentication makes sure that customers can use their social media accounts like Facebook to authenticate an Azure App Service website. So this looks good. We'll lock here. Let's move to option box 2. That is, the statement says other companies can access Microsoft SharePoint online sites for the project to which they are assigned. With Azure AD B2B, external users authenticate to their home directory but have a representation in our directory. The representation in our directory enables the users to be assigned access to our resources. So that is what we require, right? This looks good. We'll lock here. Let's look at the official documentation. Here's a very good diagrammatic view of the social media accounts like Facebook, you can see Twitter, Gmail is the WeChat, and LinkedIn. Those are there, right? So it says Azure Active Directory B2C provides business to customers identity as service. Your customers can use their preferred, just read this, preferred social, enterprise or local accounts entities to sign on access to your application and APIs. Looks good for this. And here we have an identity provider creates, maintains and manages identity information while providing authentication services to applications when sharing your apps and resources with external users. Microsoft Entra ID is default identity provided for sharing. This means when you invite external users who already have a Microsoft Entra account or Microsoft account, they can automatically sign in without further configuration on your part. Looks good. We'll log these as the correct answer. Alright, this question will test your concepts on networking. If you have done AZ-700, then there should be a piece of cake. Let's look at option A. A says enable Azure AD privileged entity management roles as VM contributor. Since enabling Azure AD PIM roles as virtual machine contributor cannot help with remote access required by the question, therefore A is out. We are left out with B, C and D. Let's tackle B first. B says enable just enough administration, also known as GA. Just enough authent administration cannot satisfy the requirement if we look here, that is provide permission to connect the virtual machine when required as asked in the question. So B is again out. We are left out with option C and D, that is C says use Azure Bastion and D says enable JIT, also known as just in time access for the virtual machines, and these are the correct answers. Okay, interesting question and somewhat related to databases this time. Let's look at option C and D. C says Azure PostgreSQL, D says SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine. Since only Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance supports dynamic masking as asked in the question, so for now C and D are out. Only qualified options are A and B, and the interesting part is we got to choose a better option because both will work. As per the question, if you look, it's written minimize the cost as well. So since Azure SQL Database is most cost effective solution when compared to Azure SQL Managed Instance, therefore we'll reject option B and keep option A. If we look at the features, how we eliminated option C and D first. So here is the features which both Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance has, that is dynamic data masking required by the question. Also, if we read the blogging post for the Microsoft here, there's a query like which is less costly, is it Azure SQL Database or Azure SQL Managed Instance? If you're confused with the cost, the answer the Microsoft people have mentioned here that Azure SQL Database is cheaper as it's offered DTUs based tier and also vCode based for more intensive workflow. So here's a calculator link as well. You can calculate or do something practically to test it out. But in the interest of time, we'll lock option A, Azure SQL Database, as the correct answer. Alright, to answer this question, you need to apply some tricks. And the trick to answer this type of question is to look for VNets or virtual networks which are paired. We need definitely one Azure Bastion subnet for the hub, one for VNets like hub, VNet 7 and 8. We need one because if you look, these are paired as marked in the blue by me. So we need one, and another virtual like we need Azure Bastion subnet for VNet 9 and VNet 10, since these both are paired. So total it comes down one for this blue one and one for this yellow one. So it comes down 1 plus 1, that is 2. If we look here in the options, option B contains 2. So we need minimum of 2. Hence we'll keep option B and reject the rest and lock it as the correct answer. So please don't go away. Let's meet in next part of the series. And the interesting part to note is that next part might be coming in 2K video quality. Unlike my other video quality till date, we have done in full HD, that is 1080p. 2K is the next level just because of your love and support, and since you are supporting this channel via membership, so it's helping me and my team to enhance the video qualities for you. So if you want to support this channel, please press the join button, click on the membership level, especially gold or above unlocks the member only videos for other series as well, and it also helps me to bring out more videos for you. So thank you so much. Let's meet in next part of the series.